Ani and friends, I am back today to talk about The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. Excuse my nails. This is why I never paint them, because I'm very rough with them and they chip, and then anyway, it doesn't matter. So I finished this maybe 4 days ago, but I've just been kind of letting the whole book seep into my mind. I've been letting my thoughts percolate a little bit. I read this on a road trip I took with my dad and my brother, and if you can read this novel in a dusty res parking lot, I recommend it because it does add to the reading experience. I made the mistake of reading this in my camper late at night on the res in the yard of my cousin's house when it was completely pitch black outside, and if you scare easily, don't do that. But this book scared me, and I don't scare easily. I love horror movies, and I think that's what I loved about this novel. It gave me the horror movie experience while reading a novel. I think that the pace in the beginning, there's an ominous mood that's set, and the beginning of the book for myself was one of those times where you think you know what's gonna happen, but then something else happens. And I will say that that does actually happen throughout the book, or it did for me anyway. But in the beginning, I thought I knew where the book was gonna go, and it just went completely the other way. The last half of the book was especially intense, and the last quarter of the book was even more intense. I don't read enough horror books or thriller novels. I do when they're Indigenous authored, but it's a genre I think I'm really going to invest more time in, especially reading novels that are Black or Indigenous authored in the crime, thriller, horror genre, because this was intense, and reading intense books is fun. For myself anyway. Some of the scenes were quite gory, and I've said I am like a horror movie fan. I like gory horror I like gory horror movies, but even I at times was like, ooh. So I would say there are some trigger warnings for obviously like gory scenes, death of animals, death of people, the harm of like children, teenagers, substance abuse, racism. But like I think a lot of these issues like intergenerational trauma, racism, as I've said before, it's kind of a common thread in a lot of Indigenous authored books because it's an Indigenous reality for tribes across all of Turtle Island. And I think that a lot of Indigenous novels, Stephen Graham Jones did this as well, a lot of Indigenous authored novels bring in a lot of Native humor, and I think that's what I liked about The Only Good Indians. There were spots that also did make me laugh. I like the depiction of res life. I think as a Native woman, reading depictions of res life, it kind of almost feels like you're going back to your own res and hanging out with your own cousins. And I think that's what made me connect so deeply to this novel, for myself anyway. And I could see a lot of people that I knew in these characters, and I think that really helped me personally connect to them on an even deeper level. But I think the characters are written in such a human way that anyone's probably going to be able to connect to them really easily. Overall, I just really enjoyed this novel. I think it's written very well. I think the parts that needed to be scary were incredibly scary. I think that we got a lot of insight into relationships, a lot of insight into cultural resurgence, the importance of holding on to cultural traditions, and how resilient Indigenous people are in the face of racism, colonialism, and how important Indigenous bonds are, familial or friendship-wise, and how those can get us through the hardest of times. I don't know if I mentioned this already, so I'm going to mention it again. I am not of the Blackfeet tribe, but I am an Ojibwe woman, so I will relate to this book better than a non-Indigenous person would. So while it's not an Own Voices review, I do think that Indigenous people will pick up on certain nuances that non-Indigenous folk wouldn't. And I was gonna do a separate video on this, but I just want to include really quickly, there have been many reviews of The Only Good Indians that have caught a lot of necessary heat because they were very critical, written by white reviewers who stated they just didn't get a lot of the stuff that was mentioned in this novel, and they don't think they're the target audience, and they don't understand what basketball had to do with any of this. Stuff like that. And a quick Google search, you can probably find articles easily about the importance of basketball to Indigenous youth on reserves and what kind of hope that gives for them and opportunities that it opens that they might not otherwise have because of settler colonialism and racism in society. And it blows my mind that people say, well, I can't relate to a lot of these Indigenous books, so, you know, 1-star rating. That's hugely problematic. Do not do that. But I think that discussions about this are important because stuff like this is happening every day. Books that are great, like The Only Good Indians, are getting a lot of heat because white reviewers can't relate to them. A little bit speechless on that, to be honest. And I mean, not only were there troubling reviews, it was the pictures that were being featured with the reviews. A lot of them used a lot of stereotypical, like, Indigenous inspired props or paintings, which is very racist. Don't do that either. Books like this are so important. Not everything is going to be written for the white gaze. Keep that in mind. But read this book. It's really good and it's really scary. And we need more books like this. But anyway, miigwech for watching.